The embeddable recorder allows you to create a recorder. You have an iframe and you embed that iframe on your website, and you can ask a series of questions. They can answer it through audio, through video, and you can capture that information. It will automatically structure the response for you, then do the transcription, then the analysis, and then you compile that into a folder and do an analysis.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. 20-Minute Leaders is a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish Israel and Tech2Peace, and is in proud collaboration with Secret Chord Ventures, J Ventures, Riverside FM, Fusion VC, Birthright Excel, J Impact, Leap, Google for Startups, and Hippo, and in media partnership with CTech. You have such an interesting background. Unfortunately, we don't have time to dive too deep into it, but from a real interesting hockey career to psychedelics to AI and specifically language, today with Speak AI, and looking at how do we extract insights from language, which really is the foundation of everything that we do. The whole way we communicate in our world is through language, and it's kind of mind-blowing how little we still today leverage information from the language we have around us, whether it be from an organizational perspective, a personal perspective. And so I'm excited to talk to you about the different use cases, the different opportunities, and how you're thinking through them, running your own startup, Speak AI. So thank you very much for being here.
Of course. And I'm just glad to be on here and fascinated with how you're going about this. Happy to answer anything I can, hopefully give some insights along the way.
Wonderful. Well, let's start 20,000 feet in the air. Insights from language. Tell me a little bit about your understanding today as to where we're at and what are the different opportunities we have in regards to extracting insights from language in general.
Yeah, I think so. You've sort of touched on a couple important pieces of it, and there's a lot of excitement right now about sort of large language models and sort of generation of language. But it seems today that a lot of the practical use cases applied in business are coming from more of a classification, extraction, summarization kind of layer. And that's been really exciting to me. I sort of went on this journey for a couple of reasons. One of them was personal. I wanted to be a hip hop artist, and I fell in love with language. I fell in love with conversation. I just thought communication and the fact that we can do this with, we can make these sort of shapes with our mouths. This can happen and we can understand each other is such a beautiful, brilliant thing. And what I realized as I started to digitize some of those conversations, I was doing both audio and video summaries and recordings, but then I was also using a system everyone's very familiar with. It often is Evernote, documenting all my sort of thoughts, journals. And I was like, why is there no sort of system that holistically combines audio, video, and text together? And then builds, why doesn't it resurface insights that are coming from that? If you're documenting so much into these systems, there's something valuable in there and something that should be sort of extracted automatically that maybe you couldn't identify as a person, but is very capable for machines to do. And so I actually fell in this journey from a very personal interest of how can we do this. And in my own work, I was doing sort of marketing, and I had a marketing agency. So what I was finding, I was doing a lot of data visualization of specifically marketing data. A lot of it was Google search, sort of keywords, search terms. And I found something really interesting, which was like a slight variation to a keyword or search term could change someone signing up, someone buying something, or it could just be something that someone was just navigating around looking for information. It wasn't going to lead into anything. And I found sort of this combination of language marketing data and then the visualization of that information. And because it was such large data sets, that if you sort of piece that all together right, you could display some insights to your client and they would have this amazing breakthrough. And that breakthrough would often be around their business, but it would also maybe even just change their entire mind of how to operate sort of personally within that business. And that's what really excited me. So, from that perspective, how can we just process this exponential increase of language data? That's where I'm really interested in, and I've seen sort of several use cases, verticals, and industries emerge and sort of adopt this technology at a high speed over the last few years.
So let's even before we dive into Speak AI and what you're doing there, let's talk a little bit about these vertical use cases and how some of these use cases can come into play in our daily lives to either make a positive impact on organizations or make a positive impact on the end consumers that are then being sort of consumers of these organizations' products.
Yeah, I think, a big separation that I've seen, and it creates a lot of nuances in it, is like conversation versus written text. And conversation, is such a crucial part of our lives, both personally and professionally. And then we start to see the emergence of systems that are now driving that. So when I think of this space, I think of transcription being one layer of this, and then a lot of the times the analysis being put on that. And then you can go into specific verticals around that. So I would say there's sort of this idea of like vertical focus versus horizontal focus companies. One of the one that comes to mind, probably familiar with Otter AI, sort of this horizontal transcription company that has been adopted, which has become almost this digital record keeping, note taking system for speech, for conversations. Really powerful, really exciting. The challenge is if you start to then segment that person who is in these conversations into a specific use case, that system might not be as powerful enough. So then you've seen the emergence of, say, I'm a salesperson, I want to do that. So then you see the Gong, you see the Chorus AI, you see these companies that are, once you go past this horizontal layer of value, which in that case is just accurate capture of data, good transcription, you need to go into this second layer, I think, which is, can we tailor this to a specific use case in industry? And can we use data from that business to optimize the insights that are coming out of it? So if Gong looks at 100 calls, obviously it's nice to see 50 calls that went well, 50 calls that didn't go well, take that CRM data, push it through, and then make the insights much more useful compared to maybe a horizontal conversation where you're sort of throwing insights and hoping that some of them hit, hoping that some of them stick. So that's what I'm really interested in, is this sort of verticalization. We see sales, you see customer services, you see healthcare, but I think they're even going more niche than that, where it's within customer service, it's customer user research. We're just going to continue to see what people think is a large industry get more and more niche and more sort of deep into each one of those niches.
Right. And so I think you're touching on this greater trend that we were seeing from an academic perspective, which is, these large language models are supposed to have these few shot or one shot cases or their ability to respond, versus these fine-tuned mechanisms where how do we take these foundation models and then fine-tune them to these specific use cases, like you're mentioning yourself. And so if we're looking at some specific interesting use cases, let's say in healthcare or customer service, whatever you choose, how do you see language dramatically impacting the way that an organization runs a hospital or runs a customer success team? How is language going to be an impactful part here?
I think one of the more practical adopted cases, and there's challenges with it because of compliance and security, but is healthcare. And just the time. So I think actually you've maybe invested, I think, in Elios Health. You've seen DeepScribe. I think generally there is just too much information and work that is put on practitioners who have really important things to do. And so there's this heavy burden, and technology has the ability to automate or at least expedite that process for them. So how can you take 5 hours of manual documentation? How can you take that down to 1 hour? How can you take that down to 15 minutes? And the amount that frees up for a practitioner, maybe professionally, to see more patients, to do better work, or also just spend time in their lives with friends and family. I think those are huge, positive impact on those businesses, on how those organizations are operating. And again, there's challenges with it, accuracy, there's all this complexity of it. But generally, I think there actually is a real world application today that at least allows you to speed up the time it would take from a manual process.
Right. And you're mentioning, obviously, a lot of these more sensitive ideas about regulation and compliance, and how do we then bring not just NLP, but technology in general into these worlds. And so diving deeper into Speak AI and your work, you came in with this sort of understanding and this motivation saying, listen, there's this blue ocean, there's all these opportunities, all these verticals and all these different use cases that we can do. What was your thesis with Speak AI?
Oh, so it's fascinating, especially when you build it into I love the sort of viewpoint that you have from a thesis perspective. What I saw from outside of a thesis, what I saw was problems that were happening concurrently in a lot of the clients that I was working with at my marketing agency. And I needed a system to help solve those problems. And so I thought that holistically combining audio, video, and text analysis together was valuable. So that was one thesis, was that we actually needed to stack speech to text and natural language processing together. And at the time, that wasn't, when I sort of first started this, that wasn't as obvious of a thesis or a thought. It was like those things were sort of running in parallel, but then just transcription alone would create another, one transcribing something just creates another set of problems. It solves one, it digitizes things, but then all of a sudden you have an overwhelming amount of information, 10,000 words. How do you process that? How do you understand that? What can you do with that information now that it's actually transcribed? And then on the natural language processing side, it was like a lot of that technology was advancing, but there was challenges with applying that to speech data and just audio in general. So the transcription layer was needed. And that's sort of in a way, that was the thesis that I had, was combine it. I didn't necessarily have the deepest vertical in mind, except that I was already working with marketing and content creation. And I saw a lot of specific use cases specific to that I wanted to explore. And I felt that I could transition my clients into that software from more of a service model, which is every agency owner's dream. And that's where some of this sort of started.
And so the Speak AI product, what products are you building there that are answering to these ideas?
Yeah, so Speak AI is sort of, luckily I've been able to fulfill some of that vision and mission. So we've built software. It has APIs that run in parallel, so companies hook into that, but is this idea of, you and I take this conversation. Right now we can stream it in or dump it in. Everything is transcribed, and that transcript becomes interactive, searchable, navigatable, but there's also this insights layer that's put on. So we're doing named entity recognition, extraction of entities, brands, people, locations, et cetera, et cetera. We're also running some sentiment analysis on it, and we're also summarizing it. What the layer that we find really fascinating, I think where we've sort of gone with ours, is we're not just trying to analyze a file individually or transcribe a file individually. We're actually aggregating it into a dashboard that is sort of updating in real time. And what we were finding was like Google Data Studio or Tableau or some of these systems had a really tough time sort of natively handling audio, especially audio and video data, to produce insights from it. So where we're spending a lot of our time is with, I would say, just to make this more concrete, is like a market research firm. Market research firm comes to us and they say, hey, we're looking to identify a trending flavor across all the food podcasts and all the food influencers on TikTok and YouTube. Right. They would dump that into our system, and we would basically automatically reveal that information for them. And that's the part that gets really exciting. And what we've found is a lot of people come in with, hey, I just want to transcribe something, and we can iteratively extract these insights and find this information on them. So when they dump a big data set in, all of a sudden it becomes this exploratory breakthrough journey that they didn't realize that they were even going to have. And so that's where we find a lot of value creation with our product and get really excited about. And so we look at, just to wrap this up, as sort of this 3 pillars: capture, analyze, and share. And those all work in harmony. And if you can't, for example, share the insights in a nice, intuitive way that other people can see and derive value from, then the whole chain of value is lost. So we're spending actually a lot of time on the sharing part, and how can you visualize this information and share it in ways that are valuable to a client or someone who's maybe non-technical trying to get insights from this big data set.
So you were mentioning this idea of non-technical user that is using this. How relevant for them is sort of this understanding of language models versus their understanding of what insights they may be able to extract from language? Because a lot of it may seem also common sense that we have all these crazy data sets or potentially in this conversation. So how do you sort of treat your end customers here? What knowledge do you expect them to have, or do they need to have in order to take part in sort of these language models and their real use cases into our world?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been a learning lesson along the way. And so a lot of people will actually come with the base use case of just transcribing something for us. Sure. And they don't even know sort of what they're about to jump into with our application. In some ways, we've had this really wonderful breakthrough moment that leads them to create more value in the app. Other times they're like, why are you giving us all these insights? We don't care. Sure. Like, you're actually getting in the way of a use case that we just want to fulfill simply. But I think what the pandemic, sort of the digitization of meetings and all this stuff, has created a more general understanding for people to maybe not understand the solution to the problem, but understand the problem, which was, I was just in 25, say, meetings this week, and there was 2,000 YouTube videos I'm supposed to research. I can't handle all this myself. I need some sort of tool. Generally, what people come to us with is, hey, I've got X amount of videos or audio files or even just big text documents. I'm looking to find X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And either our system's helping them do it automatically, or what we've actually given them is like the modular building blocks to extract that information without needing to code. And I think that's where we've found some sort of differentiation or some value, which is Maybe it's a more technical person leading it up, but they need to enable a non-technical team. They don't care about the language, the tech stack on the back. They don't care about how these models work. Like maybe it comes back to this market research firm is like, all I care is about we find the most trending flavors across all these videos, and we help them find that, and that's all that really matters to them.
And so if we're looking at this sort of base layer, which really does sound like a fundamental use case that all these companies need, right? Which is that their data extraction, summarization, named entities, transcriptions, etc. This is a pretty tough market, right? I mean, you have
for sure. Yep.
These are technologies that have been obviously built on over recent years. How do you position Speak AI to be a differentiating player within this market, where you've mentioned a lot of the other counterpart players that have been around for a while that are also giving a lot of these services? How are you thinking strategically about creating this differentiation for you?
Yeah, I think we do look at this sort of no code, low code sort of mindset, like enabling non-technical people. And I think they're generally very thankful for what we've enabled them to do, because what we typically find is there's this weird gap between, I would say, consumer applications. Maybe, again, I'll use the example, even though I love them as a company, Otter, which is doing some amazing stuff, and then now enabling more NLP, but isn't maybe necessarily letting them customize the extraction of insights to the level that they want, versus then hooking into, AWS or Microsoft Azure, or leveraging, libraries from Hugging Face, et cetera. There's a whole other sort of technical expertise that's required to make that next sort of stage or get to market happen. We're sort of sit in this nice middle spot where you don't have to have the big development team, the big marketing budget. And our goal is to get you to extraction of the insights that are valuable to you as quickly as possible without the need for a big development team or data scientist. And there is actually a surprisingly large market there that is looking to solve this.
Mm-hmm. And so from a go-to-market perspective, are you mainly positioning yourself selling to these no-code teams that are less technical, or is it the more technical leaders that are coming and saying, wow, I can leverage this tool, I understand sort of how it's used and what benchmarks it meets, and now I can bring it to my less technical team to use it?
Yeah.
Which of these is more relevant for you from a go-to-market perspective?
It's interesting. We have a really nice sort of organic channel that flows in through search, and we get a lot of the literally no-code people who are trying to do that. And then a lot of times they'll then throw our system to the more technical team member to validate that it's a sufficient. Yeah. So is this a sufficient solution? And then generally, the part where we found people want to back off or don't want to build is like sort of this interactive navigation search layer of media. It's like, hooking into a couple APIs and pulling the data out and getting it in JSON format is wonderful, but to build the whole, it was frustratingly annoying to make the system that we made. And I think developers, if they're technical enough and depending on their team, maybe they want to take that journey on, but a lot of times they don't. And they just want their team to be able to have a solution that is providing what they want. And they'll give them like the thumbs up and say, go ahead with this. And then we'll work with them to customize anything if they need it.
And so what are these teams really searching for? You mentioned that a lot of these are coming organically through searching for solutions. So what solutions or what problems do they usually search for so that they come to Speak AI? Is it mainly a Google search for transcription of sales calls, or is it something, or do you find them different things?
No, so we've built out, so we've sort of stacked modular sort of landing pages out, and it could be anything from like how to find brands and data sets. From a volume perspective of search, transcription is still the biggest driver of just like initial looking. I have a problem. Like people think this market is completely saturated and this market is done. It's not true. Like people are, for the first time ever, just trying to figure out how to solve this problem. So that's hilarious. It's not hilarious to me, but it's sort of funny that we just see this endless flow coming through that specific use case. But more just as an example, we've built sort of solutions within our system that then serve the customers that sort of stack into the rest of this workflow. For just as an example, we have this little system called the embeddable recorder. The embeddable recorder allows you to create a recorder. You have an iframe and you embed that iframe on your website, and you can ask a series of questions. They can answer it through audio, through video, and you can capture that information. It will automatically structure the response for you, then do the transcription, then the analysis, and then you compile that into a folder and do an analysis. So like if you're trying to get I'll just give you an example from an actual customer. They're like, the government of New Zealand has to do public consultations on like a bill that they're going to pass, and they want to collect audio and video responses. They'll use this and then organize it into this specific bill and analyze the responses to that. So that is fascinating. And that's a huge driver of our business. We didn't know it at the time, but it opens up an entire layer. And then the last part I'll add to that is a lot of the systems don't have pre-built or play nicely with sort of an integration layer. So one of our most successful things is a Zapier integration, which is I want this recording and the transcript. I want to send it to an Airtable row automatically every time it comes in. That our system enables that, and they go ahead and do that. So we've seen sort of dual sides: the capture side, and then I would say the analysis side, so try side. Those three pillars: capture, analyze, and then the share part, all really providing sort of traction and growth for our business.
This capturing is a really interesting idea. I'm thinking through all these massive surveys that we're sending out. We're asking people to sit down and to choose multiple choice questions. And part of that is that we need this to be ultra structured data, right? Yes. This is sort of why we have surveys in the first place. Very few times we're allowing them to be unstructured. You're basically saying, let's rethink, or we have the potential to rethink a lot of these structured surveys and turn them into more friendly, human facing interaction where we can let people speak freely and then extract these key ideas. Maybe it's not as structured and it's not as clean as traditional surveys, but it opens up a new medium for people to be able to interact with content and to share ideas that before was just unusable because we had no way of doing anything with this data, right?
Yeah, and I think we see a lot of people who are trying to sort of take qualitative information and turn it into quantitative information. We believe that's a huge opportunity, and the tools are just sort of emerging now to make that possible. And I think we will see more of a trend towards people collecting unstructured feedback and just you love those structured sort of surveys and responses, but there's this idea of people just free flowing and telling you what they think, and the amount of meaningful information that can come from that, I think is very exciting.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. How is the research integrated into, for you to be able to leverage a lot of these models and a lot of these solutions to your customers? How are you looking at natural language as sort of a vehicle of transformation, right? It's an emerging technology that over the last 5 years has been breaking benchmarks time after time. Every week, we essentially see new benchmarks being broken and new models being put out there. So how are you positioning yourself at this intersection between research and usability for the end customer? Where are you at?
Yeah. I think it really does depend on sort of the team size, the technical talent, where you are in a business. I think the way that you approach this problem. And for us, because we've sort of been lean, self-funded it, took in some non-dilutive funding here in Canada, our focus has been to sometimes inherit the advances that are being made and then customize them to the use cases that our customers specifically do. And I know that I've seen a couple of good friends in this space who have made massive investments, for example, in building speech recognitions from scratch. And now the maintenance, the cost to just keep those sufficient and advancing with some of the other systems is pretty enormous. We chose, just because of the business that we built, to try to use some third-party services, and all of them have flaws. All of them, like in an ideal world, you're all building your own systems to your perfect thing, but there's a lot of problems along the way. And then we, again, sort of customize it. So we've stacked sort of some third-party services, and we've built a lot of analysis capabilities ourselves. What we're finding more of our research and development is this final interaction layer that needs to happen. So how do you format this data for display? Or how do you take an internal data set and flip that into a publicly shareable data set in an intuitive way so that technical and non-technical people can derive value from it? So it's sort of this cross section between the back end and the front end, creating value, where we've spent a lot of our time. And from our conversations with people who are focused more on the back end, these are problems that they're really struggling or trying to figure out how to solve. So I look forward to the advancements that are made, but it's a very messy thing to try to figure out how to sort through and find, thousands and thousands of hours of audio to get the response or the information that you truly care about.
Right. I think that a lot of the what you're getting at is sort of this, and I think it's a pretty coherent agreement amongst a lot of these people that are pushing the boundaries on the research, is that a lot of these models and solutions are going to be commoditized from a technological perspective, right? So a lot of these large language models, they cost dozens of thousands of dollars a year to run a single instance of, not to mention the millions to train them. And so it sounds like what you're saying is we're taking a proactive approach, saying we're not necessarily going to be in the cutting edge scene of the research. We're not trying to push the boundaries, but we find a gap in being able to leverage some existing technologies that are already quite impressive. And how do we productize them so that the long tail of customers, the end users that are either technical or non-technical, they'll have access to them in ways that are already good enough to be pretty transformative to their own businesses. And like you're mentioning, transcriptions have been around for quite some time. Companies like Verbit and Otter, they've been around for quite a few years now, but you're saying that this is still an unsolved problem, not from a technological perspective, but from a productization perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think those companies will continue to advance. None of these companies like Amazon and Google and Microsoft, they're not building these services to, what am I trying to say? Like they're going to commoditize and productize these. So there's still a risk in that approach that you're taking. And like we've saw, even just as an example, like Google Docs released sort of like an automatic summarization layer, I think a few months ago. And there was entire companies and industries built around summarization. And in a way, Google took a pretty big chunk out of that with just a single release into the infrastructure that they have. So I think either, like you said, it's a very competitive market. I think where we're trying to do is stay as close as we can to the customer and find these like really interesting sort of edge cases where it's just not solved. Maybe it's not a big enough priority, or it's just so unique or niche that it just doesn't seem that there's a driving enough solution forward, where we often end up in head-to-head battles against companies that are maybe more capitalized, maybe seem more impressive on the outside, but they just seem to sit with us because we care, we want to solve the problem, and we've ended up building our system in this sort of modular way that allows them to get there.
So until now, my understanding was that you are taking a more generalized approach at a lot of these use cases. You were talking about the capturing, the analyzing, and then the delivering of this information. So it sounds like a more generalized approach, but you're also mentioning the more niche use cases. So what's the differentiation from your end as to how Speak AI is targeting a lot of these use cases, which will make people stick with Speak AI, even if these larger companies come in and let's say Zoom now provides these automatic transcription, summarization, search, analysis. How are you keeping those customers?
So just as an example, there's a really talented personalized nutrition research firm that we work with. And so they've sort of custom built their account on Speak to specifically operate around personalized nutrition. So just an example, a category could be ketosis. And now all of a sudden, all the insights are tailored to them. And so they have a big project where they're trying to scrape, thousands of Amazon. They're looking for certain terms basically across Amazon store reviews, app reviews, Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. And we're like, there are listening tools out there. There are ways to do that. You could push together a bunch of tools to do this. Literally we offered them some solutions that were possible. And they said, it doesn't work for us because the analysis in their system isn't tailored to the personalized nutrition work that we're doing. So they would rather actually use our system and then pull all that information into ours compared to a bunch of different services. So I think that's where we're starting to see is once you build up, basically, say you're talking about ketosis, and then we're analyzing a big data set. We're finding words that are related to that, and we're allowing you to iteratively build the analysis. We're saying, hey, here, we recommend you including this one in the analysis, et cetera, et cetera. That builds up to have a point where it's sort of hard to leave that system, and you're not going to get that data back in a structure that another company would give you. And that's where we're finding true value and then returnability and sort of continued data dumps into our systems where it builds up value over time. So I think that's what we get excited about most.
And you mentioned before something really interesting about the sort of uncovering insights that a person may not be aware that exist when they were first starting to use the platform. So you're mentioning that there's these more fundamental use cases like transcription that somebody may come to Speak AI for, but then all of a sudden they're getting exposed to all these different insights that you're providing that they weren't necessarily expecting before. You mentioned the negative part of it was saying, they're saying, whoa, I just wanted transcription. Why are you giving me all this other crazy information? Yet I think part of what I'm hearing you say is that the thesis says that this extra information is actually pretty valuable. And just because they think they only need transcription, maybe they don't understand how they can be leveraging all this other information. From a product perspective, what are you doing to help them sort of get there? And how are you productizing this in a way that these end customers can learn on the fly what are the different opportunities that natural language can provide them? Yeah,
and it's a beautiful question, one that we've continued to sort of develop and grow with. I would say that what you're saying, this insight part is essential. Like, it's not just like a nice, at the start even, it was more of a nice add-on. Like, hey, this is really cool. But now with the amount of information that is out there, it has become just a very important part of any business. And I think you're actually missing out on opportunities if you're not taking advantage of it. So generally, there's a couple of goals for us here is always to make the insights more valuable. You know what? Well, I'll just stop on this point for a second. The word insights is a tough word itself. Like, it's become this catch-all industry term. Just as an example, we used to think that entities and named entity recognition was an insight. What we found out was that is not enough. Just say, hey, we found a brand, doesn't really mean anything in context. You know what? There's no context there. So then you need to ask, how can you stack brand across multiple audio files, just an example, and then pair that with sentiment and then find related words to that brand. Then all of a sudden you're starting to stack the value or what's possible or like what you could realize through that information. And so we're just continuing to productize the display of these insights so it doesn't become just sort of this entity without context. That's one way that we're looking at it. I think the other part is like we do transcription and analysis, and there's an individual analysis, but our goal is to guide people to what we basically call the explore page or the insights page, which is almost like an aggregated dashboard. If you're familiar with Google Analytics, familiar with you, it's almost like that, except instead of seeing, how many people are watching your videos, you're actually starting to see trending keywords or sending trending phrases, et cetera, et cetera. And generally what we've found has been if we can get someone to that explore insights page at the right moment where there's something that's valuable, it's a little bit of a trigger where it's this little transformational moment that they have where they realize why we built all this sometimes seemingly unnecessary stuff on top of this layer that they're doing. So I think that's another big part that we're doing is just continually trying to make it less technical and guide them to the areas where a breakthrough is possible. And once you have a breakthrough, more breakthroughs will start to come.
Very cool. Tyler, what are you most excited about as you're working through these technologies and you're building Speak AI and you're watching all these different vertical use cases? And you mentioned before briefly how enamored you were by some of these use cases that have evolved, like with the New Zealand government. So what are you most excited about what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So, I love, just a little bit of understanding of you. You're very driven by curiosity and passion. And I think that takes you a lot of places. Sometimes takes you on the exact right trajectory you want. Sometimes you can get a little off the beaten path, exploring things. But a couple of things, I am really fascinated by large language models. I do think there is ways that sort of classification and stuff are really interesting from a business case, but I'm fascinated with more generative models. So I'm playing around with DALL-E right now. I just got early access to that. And to me, it's pretty mind-blowing what's possible. What I look forward to is when we convert that from image to video. So entire videos are built with large language models. I really am excited for that stuff to start happening. And then more generally, I think a lot of the analysis that we're doing is like sort of retroactive analysis across the entire industry. There's a lot of live transcription and captioning and stuff, but I think there's a lot more that we can do in real time with sort of the analysis of what's being said, how it's being said, and sort of helping guide conversations, helping you get the information you need in the moment and actually augment conversations to make them more impactful and positive. And my last part, I think, is just, I'm in my other life, which is my current life, is like, there's sort of this hippie spiritual part of me. So I love going to events. I love going to, Burning Man and these events where they sort of merge technology and art. And I really think there's a future where we augment our own environment with our voice to create sort of these personalized environments that help us operate at peak productivity, peak performance, peak wellness. That stuff really excites me. So I see a cross section of media and art and wellness and understanding of ourselves all combining here over the next few years. And that makes me pretty pumped sometimes.
I love it. And Tyler, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I know how busy you are. And I really appreciate your insights, both on the research-oriented piece of it, but then also the productization and how you're realizing this long tail of use cases where, we have all this great NLP technology and these great models, but we're still so far behind, it sounds like, from an industry perspective on the different things that we can fundamentally do with text and speech. And it sounds that companies that are able to productize a lot of these fundamental business needs, like transcription, capturing data, and then creating these basic insights, you're then going to be able to use the commoditized models to be able to provide richer and better experiences for your existing customers, and by creating this trust with your brand, that they know that that you're creating products that are dedicated to their use cases and their verticals, then you can continue to be ahead of the game and to continue to provide them with really interesting work. So thank you very, very much, Tyler. I really appreciate your time and your energy, and best of luck with Speak AI.
Thank you, sir. Great.